So we were talking about Carson Wentz earlier. That's why I wanted to segue into it. The whole title of this message is Purpose Over Popularity. And Carson Wentz and really the whole Philadelphia Eagles team, they understood that hand in hand. That their purpose above winning the Super Bowl was to glorify God. And they didn't care how many people that it upset. My favorite part was that they immediately said glory to God before they did anything else, because honestly they probably figured the media was going to cut them off because they were waiting for that to happen. So that's why I wanted to segue in and mix up our routine a little bit, because the reality is that if we're all honest, we all want to be approved by others. We seek popularity so much. And I remember a story when I was in 8th grade, and Mr. Bateson was our English teacher, and he asked for us to all raise our hand and said, who in this room cares what people think about you? And at the time I was the only one to not raise my hand. I was really doing it to try to be cool. But the reality is, but the reality is that all of us care what other people think about us, and our actions at times mirror what other people want rather than what we really should be doing along the way. We should be not caring so much about what other people think and focused on pleasing God, because so that way the approval of other people doesn't consume us along the way. It's what God wants. He wants us to be consumed with His passion so that we don't care what others say. So the message again is titled Purpose Over Popularity. But many of us choose the opposite, and it not only consumes us, but it makes them into things that we shouldn't be. Why is that? Because we stop focusing on God, and instead we focus again on so many things that other people are doing and what they're saying, and we could get caught up with that in this church if we're not careful. There's a lot of reasons why churches fail, because they focus on what all the people want over what the purpose is, which is praising God along the way. So first, just a few simple points really. First of all, living for the approval of people keeps us from the purposes of God. And we're going to look at Galatians 1:10 for that. This was Paul speaking to the Christians of Galatia. And you know that after he said this, he didn't apologize for his words. He said, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. So, what's Paul saying there? When we try to please other people all the time, there's no possible way that we can do what God really wants us to do. We just can't. Because you can do it for a little while, but then we get sucked into what these other people want. And then it kind of becomes this keeping up with the Joneses scenario of like, oh, Jimmy wants this, so I'm going to go off and buy this, or I want to be cooler than Joe, so then I'm going to buy this. And, that just happens, I think, too often. It's part of the issues that we have as a country is that we just focus so much on, the consumerism of everything, so we can be the popular person, and we can say, oh, look at Billy's new truck. Well, guess what? Now he's paying $700 a month for a truck payment so he can look cool. And it's, and then when an opportunity comes up to go to church, you've got to take that day of overtime to make your truck payment. So what Paul's saying here is really like, it's God or it's people. You pick. The God is not the easy choice. The people is obviously easily the popular choice, but we need to be focusing on God. And when we focus on people, you notice that you are deeply kind of unhappy about it. I'm reading a book right now. It's called 9 Mistakes of something or other. I forgot to write the title down. But it's it's cool because it focuses on somebody who's trying to figure out his purpose. And he starts off so unhappy because he's in a job where he doesn't necessarily care for, and he just even took this position to really please his parents along the way. And things didn't go necessarily as planned, but then he hits this turnaround where he kind of gives these people, and they give him 9 life tips, basically, along the way. And some of those tips include, making sure that you're talking to God, making sure that you're doing something that's going to make you happy, and also be able to pay the bills. And then a huge part about all this was surrounding yourself with good people. Because if you notice that if you surround yourself with, we talk about this all the time because I think it's so key, but you surround yourself with the yes people, or you surround yourself with the Debbie Downers, and you could go into work. I did it for 5 years at the Nuke plant. I could go into work every day and say, it's going to be a good day today, and then all of a sudden, You get 18 other people around you and they're telling you how much it sucks. And then so what happens? You sink in and your feelings start to be that same way. You can't help but say, well, I'm making this much money. Yeah, but we're doing this. And you get kind of caught up in that. Now, it wasn't the position for me. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy where I'm at. But I'd be silly not to point that out, is that, it's very easy to get sucked into all of that nonsense. And but we need to focus on the purpose over the popularity. So, and you were picked on for it at times because you'd say, yeah, but we're making good money. Yeah, but, and I'm guilty. I did it myself. But it's just so easy to get sucked into it along the way. And I think part of why we get sucked in, though, is because we forget to really understand what our capital P purpose is, like our big picture purpose. And then when we forget about the big picture, then we kind of mess up the little picture. So Billy Graham said, my one purpose in life is to help people find a personal relationship with God, which I believe comes through knowing Christ. All of us should really take that as our big picture purpose, is getting people to know Christ. And then all of our actions through that, our little purpose piece, should really mirror that. So we need to be making sure that, how we're living, how we're parenting, how we're being friends, how we're working, all that mirrors something, so that way people want to get to know Christ along the way. And that's not going to happen if we're getting sucked in, because I don't know, I've started to think about what makes a good leader, and part of what makes a good leader is someone that has to make difficult choices. And when you're able to make those choices that aren't necessarily the popular choices, then your business a lot of times thrives. But if you sit there and someone says, I need this day off, I need that day off, and they've taken all this time off, and you just give it to them because you want them to like you, you're not necessarily going to be a respected boss, and you're not going to hold true to your values, I guess, as an organization. And it's hard to think about, but I just think that it's, and so we're going to also now look into our main Bible verse is going to be in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 23 through 26. It's about Moses. And what struck me about when I was reading this is that 4 times in these small verses right in this little section it says by faith. By faith 4 times. And I think that's how we understand our purpose, is by being faithful to God. But it says by faith, when Moses had grown up, he refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as a greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead at his reward. So basically, Moses had a choice. We know in Exodus he was put in a river, and Pharaoh's daughter took him in along the way because they were looking to basically kill any Hebrew boys. So Moses had the opportunity to grow up in this royal lifestyle, but in doing so he was kind of going against everything that he believed, and he made the difficult choice, and he decided instead to say, nope, not doing it, and then he went against Pharaoh. I want to be a great leader. So Moses knew that what his purpose was, and it kind of diminished the distractions, which is point number 2, is that purpose diminishes your distractions. One of our biggest distractions, I think, again, if we're being honest, is the idea of comparison. We're always comparing ourselves to others because we want what they have. She's already finished school and I'm not there yet, or he's making more money than I am. All my friends are married. I don't even own my house. I'm way behind on my bills. And we just get so caught up because, we see what everyone else has. We talked about this again in a previous week of we want to have what our parents have, and it takes a long time to get there. Our purpose then should be to be able to be as successful as what our parents are, but we need to get to that point. The book of Nehemiah from the Old Testament, he was angry that the walls of his city were broken, and so he got upset and he wanted to do something. So he built a wall. And while he was doing it, people told him it was stupid and it was a waste of time. And you know what he said? He's like, I'm too busy building this wall. I can't listen to you guys right now. People are shouting at him. But he knew his purpose was to rebuild this wall for protection. So, quite honestly, he didn't really care. So, because he chose that purpose over popularity. And I just thought that was kind of a cool verse, because we all get sucked into, you're in the middle of doing something important, and you're always going to have people, friends, family, random strangers telling you that it's stupid. And so, but when you know that your purpose is something greater than what's going on there, people quite honestly probably tell us this is stupid to meet with 10, 15 people in a group. Why put time and effort into planning something? But our purpose is greater than, having 100 people. Would it be nice? Sure, we talked about it again, but our purpose is just to grow as Christians. And if we can get one person to come in, one coworker to listen, one friend to check it out 1 week, then we're working on that big P purpose. I've told you guys in a previous week about Bob Childress. He was the one that started the churches in the Blue Mountains. I was reading part of it, and it just kind of made me laugh. It fits pretty good with this. So he, at this point, was accepted. He found out that the first church he was going to lead was in the Blue Mountains. The people up there were still crazy. They're still killing people with guns all the time, just scaring people off pretty much. And when he went to introduce people, he said, "Look, dear friends, I'm a Presbyterian," he began. "I don't believe there are many Presbyterians around. On the way up here, I stopped at a cabin, and by the way of striking up a conversation with a woman at the door, I asked, 'Any Presbyterians in this part?' And the woman said, 'I don't rightly know,' she replied. 'Jeb does a lot of trapping and tacks up all of his hides on the smokehouse door. Why don't you just go down and have a look?' No one laughed except Leela and the children. This is the part that struck me. He said, 'My friends,' Bob went on undaunted, 'I aim to live here a long time as your neighbor, providing you don't tack up my hide on a smokehouse door. I aim to get this school a-going and fill it full of your nice, smart youngins. I aim to hold services and preach and help any way I can, and someday, God willing, we'll build a church together.'" So Bob Childress knew his purpose was to lead the Blue Mountains to Christ. And he didn't care what anybody said. And guess what? It ended up working. He didn't let the distractions get him. And then I just think that when you know your purpose, it's really easy to kind of get to where you're going. So that's why it's so important to know purpose over popularity. So if you know your purpose is to get out of debt, someone says to you, "Why are you bringing a brown bag to the office for your lunch?" Well, save me $10 a week, so I'm going to do it because $10 is important. "Why are you staying pure in a world of lust?" I'm doing it for God. It's important to me. "Are you sure you're supposed to be a stay-at-home parent?" Absolutely. I think this one struck a chord with me a lot because I just think of people look at us like we're crazy. I mean, take a huge pay cut as it is and then still be able to have a wife that stays home. Melanie will send me pictures of the kids sleeping after a hard day, and she'll say, "This is what I'm supposed to do." When you know it, man, it really strikes a chord. No matter what people are saying, you can do something once in a while, but when you know in your heart it's what you're supposed to be doing, whoop-de-freaking do what average Joe Dowler says. I mean, we'll all get to that point where we're prosperous in some way, but it takes time to get there. And then I'll just skip over the rest of this and, just skip to this point. The pathway to purpose sometimes, really all the time, is paved with some sort of pain. If you think about all the people in the Bible, they didn't just have it easy to get to where they were going. If it was, I don't think that it would be as memorable. And then if you look at us as humans, we don't get to where we're going. Mothers having a child. That delivery process is not fun. I remember being in the room with Melanie, and it was crazy, but you push through that pain because in the end of the day, you get a screaming little baby. Some days that you wish wasn't screaming, but you go through. The reality is that you push through that pain because you know the purpose is that you're going to have that child.
Easy for you to say, right?
Yesterday I was running, and man, it was terrible, but I have a purpose. I'm going to do this half marathon. I'm going to get myself healthy. So you push through the pain because you know that there's an end game in sight. If I can be 20 pounds lighter and complete this, I'm going to be healthier long term, and I'm going to be able to take care of Bryce. That's when you know your purpose, you push through whatever the heck is going on. And we also have a God that can help us through it all, which I think is the biggest thing, is that we need to understand that, when you're going through pain, is that we serve a God who's right there with us. So, and lastly, when you know your purpose, it empowers you to please God. When Pharaoh tried to stop Moses in the Hebrew story, he wasn't deterred. When people complained, criticized, and rebelled, Moses stayed on task. Because purpose empowers you to please God. Peter and the apostles, when they were preaching Christ, religious leaders would tell them to stop. And if you looked in Acts 5:29, Peter and the other apostles replied when they said that, we must obey God rather than human beings. So what it boils down to is that we can't please everyone, but we can please God. There's a value in being liked by people. There's a value in having friends with friends. There's a value to start something important. There's a value in comfort. There's a value in being popular. But guess what? There's a greater value when you're loved by God. A greater value when you're faithful to God. A greater value when you're finishing something and not just starting something. A greater value when you step out of your comfort zone and go into your calling. And a greater value when you're serving God's purpose. So, just look at that as we're all raising our kids and we're up to your neck in diapers. We just need to keep our eye on the prize. Keep your eye on that purpose. For getting out of your debt, you got to make sacrifices every day. Look forward to that reward of saying, you know what, in 5 years, it's not going to happen overnight. You push through the pain. 5 years from now, you're going to be debt free. You set a goal, you set a purpose, and you keep it. If you are a foster child or you're fostering children, it's like one of the hardest things you're ever going to have to do. But the purpose is going to push you through. And the reality is that we can do all things through Christ. And so it doesn't say in the Bible we can do all things through Joe Schmo. It says we can do all things through Christ. And that's what we need to focus on overall. Is that it's not easy all the time, but when you live to please God, you're going to stay on task, you're going to stay focused, and great things are going to happen.